Hello,
Hello,
I'm Blaine.
I'm Louise, and welcome to the Thinking About Being a Driving Instructor section. We're really pleased that you have found us. I'm pretty sure that you are in the midst of doing some research, or maybe we are the first people that you have found, but either way, you are very welcome. We've set up this section with a view to giving you the best information that we can, hopefully in a fairly unbiased way, but at the very early stages of your research, so that the decisions that you make in the near future are made with an informed choice, so that you have the information that you need about whether this is for you to start with, and what you now do in terms of your next steps, and your options in terms of your training, as well as how we actually qualify.
Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff out there, isn't there? And most of it is out there from the companies that are trying to sell you something. And we do have something to sell, but that's really isn't the point of this section, is it? Because what we get on a daily basis is we wish we had this information before we did whatever we did, and we talk about that sort of stuff as we go through. So as Lou says, it's about having an informed decision, and then you're an adult, you can obviously make that decision, but not being bitten on the bum later on by not knowing that information now, and that's really important.
Yeah. So certainly continue to do your research, but make this section, thinking about training to be a driving instructor, part of your research. So complete this section, and obviously come and find us if you've got any queries or questions, and we may or may not see you through your journey.
I'm sure we probably will at some point or another, even if it's just our Facebook page and things.
Yeah, perhaps indeed.
But Mrs. Lewis says, keep reading through, and there'll be lots of links and things like that to help you out.
Yep.
See you in a minute.
Thank you.
Bye.
So,
So used to saying.
shall I start this one off?
Yeah, go on then. You seem to be in charge.
What is a driving instructor? So if you have found these videos at the very, very start of your research, let's just reassure you and perhaps give you some extra information about exactly what a driving instructor is.
Okay, my turn apparently. Driving instructor is basically someone that can charge for their services to teach in a car.
And are licensed to do so.
Yeah. So the license, once you've gone through the process, which you'll see more about that as you go through this page, you are then able to charge a monetary value or equal to charge in a car. There are different rules for SUVs and buses and all that sort of stuff. But if you're looking at cars, this is what you can do. It's not just learners though, is it? That's the thing. You will go through the process if you're going to teach learners, even saying that you can do it with full license holders. But there are other things you can do with it if you want to once you're qualified, isn't there?
So we have driving instructor colleagues of ours who are using their green badge. The green badge is what you are after to qualify and show that you are a licensed, approved driving instructor. We have colleagues who are using their green badges to train in the military, to take driving in the military, to train in supercars and elite driver training.
Quite a big thing at the moment.
There are emergency service vehicle training, there's mobility training and support. So I think that there are numerous places that your green badge can take you.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
if you're finding this this section, it may well be because you have a vision that you'll be teaching predominantly provisional license holders. But just to let you know that there are various avenues that your green badge can take you down.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not just learners, but most people do learners. But the supercar thing seems to be a big thing at the moment. All these sort of track days, and you pay £50 to go around a lap of wherever, and there's certainly a lot of our colleagues are doing that at the weekends. Our timeline is full of them in their supercars at the weekends, isn't it?
Lots of under-17s as
yeah,
well at the moment, going into
that,
schools and educating in schools. So lots of possibilities. So just to give you a bit of a summary of the terminology that you might well hear. You may well hear us or other people talk about a DVSA ADI. So that is a Driving and Vehicle Standards Agency approved driving instructor. So an ADI is an approved driving instructor. You may also hear the term PDI. PDI stands for Potential Driving Instructor, and that is what you guys would become at the point where you are on the register and you are on the journey to qualifying to be an ADI.
And we didn't say in the first video, but we are ADIs, aren't we?
We are ADIs and ADI trainers.
And been ADIs for some time, as you can probably tell.
With the grey hair.
Yeah, absolutely. Hair coloured, isn't it?
Okie dokie. So
Okay.
that's what being a driving instructor is about, and the next few videos will be telling you about the training process and the options that you have, including the reality and perhaps some of the things to consider before training to be a driving instructor.
Others might not tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, see you in a minute. Oh, it's us again, isn't it? We haven't been gone very far. Okay, it wasn't very funny. So now we're going to look at the reality of the job, the good, bad, and the indifferent, aren't we, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Because you'll hear all the good things from various people, and this and that, run it around your school and all that sort of stuff. But there's realities to all that sort of stuff as well, isn't there?
Yeah. So I think that be very cautious about what you are researching and reading in terms of the promises that are being made about the industry. The good things, let's start with the good things. Both of us have been driving instructors for a while now, and we're still in the job because we still really love it. I think the day that you stop loving it is the day that you should be giving up.
Yeah,
It's
anything
the
you
same with any
like,
job.
which is potentially why you're sat here 2 o'clock in the morning watching this, because you've had a bad day at work and you're looking for something else.
Yeah, absolutely. The satisfaction is immense to get a pupil to the standard or the stage that they're wanting in their journey. Now, some pupils that's not even passing a driving test, but if it is a driving test pass, there's nothing more satisfying than watching that examiner hand out a test certificate, particularly with pupils who perhaps have struggled in other aspects of their lives or are going to have amazing differences made to their lives by passing a driving test. It's a fantastic, satisfying job. It is also more than possible to work it around your family. So maybe you're watching this because you are looking for a career change that perhaps works around small children or fits into a semi-retirement package, or you might have some redundancy that you're looking to do something proactive with. You might, as Blaine said, just be a bit fed up after a pretty naff day at work and looking for a change of career. You might already be in a teaching profession and think this is the next step for you. It's absolutely there to pick up the pieces, I guess, isn't it, of so many possibilities and so many different areas of walks of life that we've all come into it from.
Absolutely. I think that's what's one of the fascinating things for me, and I think yourself as well, is the walks of life people do come from. We have people from all walks of life. I can't think of any that people don't come from, because it's one of those only things that you can come into without having to have academic qualifications, and you don't have to give your CV to anyone or anything like that. So as long as you're willing to go through the process, which we're going to talk about in other videos, then anyone can achieve it. I mean, my personal reasons were I was working in factories. I came out of school with no qualifications. I was working in factories, only sort of jobs I could get, didn't enjoy it, etc. And the only thing I found was this, that you could do without those formal qualifications I didn't get at school, without going back and doing loads of A-levels or O-levels back at night school, which was taking longer than doing this process.
So it could have been a passion from a very young age that you wanted to do this. It could be that you have been teaching fairly successfully your son or daughter, and just as a supervising driver, and thinking, oh gosh, maybe I could do this. Absolutely. Could well be that you have some experience that you're feeling like you want to share from a road safety point of view as well, from your life.
Yeah, I just want to be out more, and as Lou said, fitting it in round family commitments. We certainly do it. It's not as easy as some people make it sound. You have to be good at diary management, you have to be good at saying no, you have to be flexible, and you need to be flexible. So you might not ever work weekends, but if you've got a pupil who's got a test on a Monday and had to miss a lesson and just needs that little polish up, then you might need to be willing to do that, don't you?
I think that comes into the reality of the job. So that's all the good stuff, all that lovely stuff that we're enjoying on a daily basis. The reality, in terms of some of the promises that you'll be seeing being made online, for example, will include how much money you can earn a week, month, or a year. Be cautious of that, certainly. Of course, that depends on the amount of outgoings you've got, including franchise fees, perhaps, if you go down that route.
New car every 6 weeks.
New car, your petrol, etc., etc. So be a little bit aware of that.
And there will be guidance on that type of stuff, what your options are as you
yeah.
go through our videos and things.
Amount of hours that you're prepared to work.
Exactly. No holidays, no sick pay, so you have to put 10, 15 to 20% to buy for that type of thing. Tax and all that sort of stuff. But because you're self-employed, you probably won't pay as much tax as you would if you were employed, because the tax systems are slightly different. So there's all swings and watches, isn't there?
You have to be ready for cancellations, both from pupils' point of view, both from you having to cancel because of sickness of family members or yourself. injured cars. You may well have a car that means that you can't get to a pupil, so you have to factor all of those kind of things in. And of course the DVSA themselves potentially cancelling tests. That can be something that that happens.
And running a business.
So it is running a business.
So even if you're within a franchise, and we again talk about those more, what that means later on, but even if you're taking work off someone else and supplying, you're still running a business within a business. That involves paperwork, that involves red tape, doesn't it? That involves some worries and all that type of stuff. So you've got to sort of be willing to do that. And a lot of people that come into this industry have come into it from 20, 30, 40, whatever years where they haven't run a business. You've got to consider that part of it, because that's one of the biggest shocks I think a lot of people have, isn't it?
Yeah.
That business side of things. It's not terrible, it's not horrendous, but it's worth considering.
It could be a new skill if you've never been self-employed before, and that's something to be aware of.
Yeah.
I think from a people point of view, it's also has both its pros and its cons. So perhaps you are the kind of person who is wanting to jump ship from a large team and work for yourself. Perhaps you're the opposite and you're wanting to be working with people, and you like the idea of the fact that you're going to get to know people on a one-to-one basis and be teaching these people to drive. It can be, if you let it, a fairly isolating industry. It can be a lonely job. It doesn't have to be. There is lots of help out there, lots of support out there, and the majority of driving instructors in your local area, despite this, I guess this understanding the reality of that we're all looking for the same pupils in the same patch, so there's that competition element about it. I have to say that the driving instructors that we work with around the country, the stronger they are and the more they work together, the stronger the industry is together. So it's the more friendship there is, the more a close-knit association, so there may well be local associations to you to go and look at, the better and the more healthy the industry is within that
online
area.
groups and all those types of things. You can be isolated if you want to do it on your own completely. You can do that, but it's going to be more difficult in lots of ways. You know, because if your car breaks down, you haven't got anyone to borrow a car off, someone to take someone for test for you because you've been woken up early in the morning, etc., etc. So having a local network is a pretty important thing, but you can still be independent.
We hear people say that they would like to be a driving instructor because they love driving. You are not going to do an awful lot of driving. In fact, you are going to be in a passenger seat with somebody who can't drive. So that is something to be aware of. Liking driving or even thinking that you're a good driver is not necessarily the reason to be
it might wind you up when people can't drive your car. Some people come to it for a similar reason. They like cars. So we've got a lot of car heads, petrol heads, don't we, in this industry, and they go and buy £25,000 car to teach in. Lovely new alloys, first junction. Oh dear. So it's not a problem if you do love cars and you're coming in for that reason, but be aware of the realities. You won't be driving it most of the time. Someone else will be driving it, and you could be very precious about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And other people run 15, 20-year-old cars because it's cheaper that way. So, but again, that advice can be given later. So there is an online tool, isn't there, out there, so it's approved by the DVSA, which is the guys that test you and so on. And we've put a link under this video, and it takes about 20 minutes. We've just both done it, haven't we? Luckily, we both came through as suitable.
Well, so this is an online survey, I guess it is, isn't it? So, with numerous questions that finds out a little bit about your character to see whether you have an appropriate character to join the industry. It also asks you perhaps a few common sensey, knowledgey type of almost highway code stuff, perhaps. And perhaps a little bit also of what you might do if a pupil was or wasn't doing something. So
and your attitude towards things. What I'd say on that is, it's obviously got an agenda. It's trying to work out something. So answer it honestly, not what you think they want to hear, because you're the one that's going to suffer in the long run. Do years of training and whatever, qualify and then hate the job and want to give it up. And you know, that does happen. Is it the average life expectancy of a driving instructor is about 3 years?
A little bit longer than that, but it's not meaning, you know, to
die
in a car. It's meaning to continue with your business.
So that's being the right person. Just knowing you're the right person at the beginning is really important, because you go through all that process and then just want to give up after a while, rather than being long-termers like us.
So the link that is in this section to that survey that takes about 20 minutes, it's multiple choice. So the answers are in there. As Blaine says, make sure that you're answering it appropriately and truthfully. And at the end, you will be given a summary as to your attitude and whether it is deemed to be a potentially okay job for you to dip your toes into and go further with.
Yeah.
So have a go at that. That will look a little bit at your character and as we said, some other things.
Yeah. Don't worry about the theory side of it. If you don't know, you don't know. That's where your training is going to help you. That's the first section that's the most important, I feel.
Yeah.
The others are sort of expecting some sort of knowledge which you may or may not have. So don't concern yourself too much about
It's
that.
of no consequence either in terms of it's not going to cost you anything to do, and it's not going to dismiss you from the industry completely if you.
And you're not giving your names or anything like that, so no one's going to see it and say, "Oh, John Smith, he's gone on to train, but this said he shouldn't do it." It's just for your benefit because it is important you find out if you're the right type of person or not.
So go and have a little look at that link and answer those questions, and then continue to watch the videos that are now going to talk you through the process of qualifying, so what you have to do to qualify, the factual kind of stuff, and then of course the video that talks about your options and your training possibilities and how to go about doing that.
Because that's maybe not necessarily what you think it is. There's lots of different ways of doing it, isn't there? Okie dokie. See you in a minute. So now we're going to talk about the legal side of things and whether you're legally able to train to be a driving instructor. So not the process, we're coming on to that, but whether you legally should start the process or start the process of process. That makes sense.
So in other words, are you going to be accepted onto the register to be allowed to continue to train? Let's get some of the formality over and done with. The DVSA is the Driving Vehicle Standards Agency. It is a government agency. It is headed by our ADI registrar. So she's kind of in charge of our standards, if you like, of the driving instructor standards. And of course, heading all of that is the Minister for Transport. So that's where it kind of comes down, cascades from a government point of view. The DVSA are a standards agency, as it says in their title. They are there to set the standards both for qualifying and of course continuing to make sure that we reach the standards as driving instructors to be teaching people to drive. So that includes the checks that would happen after you've qualified, and we will talk about that as well. They are not a training body, so you're not going to get training through the DVSA. Training happens within the industry, and that is the next video that we'll be talking about the training options.
How licenses and stuff like that.
Yeah. So to be accepted onto the register before you train, there is this criteria. So the criteria is...
You have to, I'll say it and then I'll backtrack myself. 21 with 3 years experience in the category you're going to teach. So what that means... Driving
licence.
Yeah. So what that means is if you're categorised for a car, and we're talking about cars now, we're not talking about any of the others. So cars, if you've got an automatic licence, you could only teach automatic. And if you've got a manual licence, you can teach manual and automatic. But it's 21 and 3 years until you can teach. If you're 20 now, you can start the process.
Yeah.
You just can't teach until 21 and 3 years on that full licence. Yeah. So there's different rules if it's a foreign licence and stuff, but we'll put a link so you can check all that because it's different, depends on where it comes from and stuff like that. So that's the basic criteria. Then we come on to basically criminal records, I suppose, isn't it?
This is the bit that they call fit and proper person, personal conduct.
Yeah. So again, we'll put a link to what the DVSA say on their site about that because it saves us reading it all out. But basically, let's look at driving first. If you've got 5 points or more on your licence, it's unlikely you're going to be allowed to teach within the last 3 years. So if you've got 6 points and one of them's going to drop off in a month's time, wait a month and then put your forms in, basically. That's the main one, isn't it? The other one is, it seems to me, is the other one they're really hot on is financial conduct of some sort. And we're not talking, being late with your credit card bill. We're talking taking money from people and not giving it back. Fraudulent activities, stuff like that. And if you've been an instructor before and you've been prosecuted for taking money up front and not giving the lessons, which unfortunately is a reasonably common thing, it can happen in training as well, that is going to go against you big time, isn't it? That you're not going to be allowed back on the register. Everything else is taken into account.
The other one, which links into your DBS is, of course, inappropriate conduct with children. That would be a big one.
Because you are dealing with children because they're under 18, or some of them will be under 18.
So you would be asked to fill in and send off for your enhanced DBS. So if you've got a DBS with the job that you're in at the moment, that isn't going to be carried forward. It's a
even if
DBSA
it's enhanced, it's a
one.
completely separate one. You have to do it again.
And the links to all of that are in this Thinking About. Again, it's just worth doing. So even if you're sitting here listening to this, or you read the links that we send you and you think, oh, I'm not sure whether I'm going to be accepted, do you know, it's just worth doing the process and going for it and seeing what the outcome is, because the registrar does look at it on an individual basis, and that is made very clear. So have a go at that. Be aware that they will be looking at other things. So the registrar has the opportunity to look at, obviously, criminal records and DVLA records, DVSA records, etc., etc. So you would be.
They will dig reasonably deeply, wouldn't they? Yeah, absolutely. I certainly had one I can think of that probably hadn't had anything, and then someone came back when going to jail and he'd forgotten about it. I'm not sure he'd forgotten about that particular one, but he had forgotten about it, and still got on the register because he just, they will ask you to give details, why it happened, how it happened, all that sort of stuff. So if you do have some sort of criminal record or past, it definitely isn't a no. I won't give any examples because it's data and stuff, but there's some examples I can think that are pretty big things that people got on the register.
We're not all squeaky clean, and there are skeletons in cupboards. But the advantage, one of the advantages of training to be a driving instructor, is that nobody's asking for CVs and nobody's asking for qualifications. So from that point of view, from a criteria point of view, the majority of us are able to be accepted onto the register.
One of the biggest things is the points on licence, isn't it? Which, is sort of understandable. But other things you can get away with. But as Lou says, unless you've got 12 points or 9 points, I would put it in and see. It doesn't cost you anything. It costs you £6 to go to the post office for them to check your paperwork, doesn't it? That's all.
So go get that done. Follow the link. And start the process. So this is before you've perhaps even found a training company that you're wanting to go with, even thought about your future, all that kind of stuff. There is nothing that means that just because you've done your DBS that you are now on the path. It's you're not on a treadmill that you can't get off.
You've got 2 years in you to use that, I think. So start the process. So it's not.
Crack on.
And I would just reiterate what Lou said there. She said, even before you've found a training company, I would definitely do it before you found a training company, because they can tie you into contracts to do that for you and all that sort of stuff, which we'll talk about on other videos. But do this independently, get the ball rolling, and then you buy yourself time. How long would it take to come back? We did ours recently, didn't we? Because we renewed our badges. Mine was like 4 or 5 days. There can be 2 or 3 months, can't they? It depends where you are. If you're somewhere like London, apparently London's a bit of a nightmare for getting them back. If you haven't moved around, that helps. I think they go back 7 years. So if you've been in the same house or the same area, like Hampshire or wherever, then it's going to come back quicker. But send it off now. Even if you're thinking, oh, this is 6 months time, send it off now, get it done. You can always do it again if you need to.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Now we're going to talk about the process itself, aren't we? As in, there's 3 parts, isn't there? So you've got your DBS back, you then filled in your form again, all the links on here, to then the registrar to write back and say, yes, you can start your training process. You're on the register at that point. It doesn't mean anything really. It doesn't mean you can't teach. It doesn't mean you can teach or anything like that. It just means that you won't go all the way to the end and then the registrar say, no, thank you very much. He's approved you before you start training.
It also means that from a system point of view, so from the technology point of view, when it comes to booking your tests, the system recognises you. So you will not be able to book your driving instructor tests until you have been accepted onto the register.
And you're given something called a PRN number. Just worth saying here that if you have gone round before, and a lot of people do go around again for whatever reason, the system does not work and you have to phone up. But you'll find that out because it thinks you've passed all the tests already and it gets very confused because it's really good, the system. Okay, so part one is basically theory, isn't it? So important thing I think with this, it's not the same theory your son, daughter, niece or nephew might have recently done. So you might have just spent the last day looking at all their theory stuff and done all their theory tests, and now I'm telling you it's a completely different one, completely different stuff. Simple things that are different, I think, it's all description, so there's no pictures. There's no picture of a giveaway. It says, what does this mean? They describe a giveaway sign, don't they? Triangle sign with giveaway written in it, etc. So that's a bit different in the way you do that, isn't it? And the questions are a lot different. They're a lot more about teaching techniques and things like that, and disabilities and laws and stuff like that aren't covered in the our test theory.
There's basically 100 questions that you need to answer. The pass rate is much higher than it is for a pupil. They're done at Pearson's driving test centres, so not at a driving test centre, at a Pearson's office. And again, when it comes to booking your theory, all of that will come up online in terms of your local test.
There's a lot of them
centre.
around, isn't there?
It's computer based and it is multiple choice. You will also have the hazard perception part of it as well, which is again, that is similar in terms of the hazard perception that
clips was exactly the same.
pupils
Pass
will
rate's
use,
higher,
but there are more clips and your pass rate is higher.
yeah.
So that is the theory.
And again, we'll put what the pass rates are underneath the videos because they do change. So we won't say them on the video because then we have to remake the video. Don't we?
As with the costs, we won't say the cost because that again changes, but all the information will be on the links that we give you. Now, in terms of the process, you can take your theory as many times as you want or you need until you pass. And the clock doesn't start ticking in terms of your qualifying process until you have passed your part 1. So at the point where you've passed your part 1, that theory side, you then have 2 years in which to complete your qualifying process and to train to be a driving instructor. If you do not complete the qualifying process within that 2 years, you would have to start the whole process again, regardless of whether you have passed your part 1 or part 2 within that time. So that's something to be aware of. The clock starts ticking at that point.
Sounds a long time, doesn't it? But it soon shoots past.
Then you have your part 2. You can't book your part 2 until you have passed your part 1. Your part 2 is basically an advanced driving test. I know you don't like saying that. You'll hear people say advanced driving test. It's an extended driving test, if you like, of which you will be tested on more things than your pupils will be tested on. But it involves an hour-long driving with an examiner who sits in the passenger seat and watches you drive. You can take that test either in a manual or in an auto, of course, depending on the licence that you had as a full licence holder. If you chose to take your Part 2 test in an automatic car, and as long as you hold a manual driving licence, you will still be able to teach people as a driving instructor in a manual and an automatic car. Obviously, if you only hold a automatic licence in your own licence category, you could only be teaching in an automatic.
And you may well read or going to read someone say that's not correct. It definitely is correct. Okay, there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. That rule changed 2, 3, 4 years ago. Some organisations' websites are still out of date and you'll read the wrong information. So as long as you've got a manual licence, you can take a test in whatever and you can teach in whatever.
In terms of taking the test, in terms of the car that you take your test in, it may well be that you have a trainer, and it may well be that you're training in your trainer's car. It may well be that you have a friend or even a relative who's a driving instructor who is offering you their car to take that test in. You can take the test to a certain extent in the car that is the car that you're driving now. Again, if you go onto the site, the links that we are putting on this section, you'll see the criteria that your car has to meet to be able to be accepted for a Part 2 test. It doesn't have to be a dual-controlled instructor car.
No. The only thing I would say on that, we'll cover this more detail later on, but is insurance. Please check your insurance because you are on test and most car insurances don't allow you for test or tracks and things like that. So do check that. You can't take a hire car unless it's a dual-controlled hire car because of the insurance mainly again. So that's worth knowing. But as I said, under this video will be a link to all that sort of stuff. I would say on the Part 2 that to me, the Part 1 is about having knowledge. Part 2 is about showing understanding of that knowledge, because if you can carry that knowledge out into a physical action, that shows more understanding as part of the learning process. So I can understand how to fly a helicopter, but unless I fully understand it, I won't be able to fly a helicopter. So you've got to show that you fully understand all the routines that are in the various books, and again there'll be links for that type of stuff. It's a bit like a job interview, I feel, as well, because at that point you can do a set number of hours of training, which is 40 hours, and then you can teach. So the examiner He's looking to see what is this person going to teach these learners if they go and do their 40 hours next week.
I think that's the purpose of your part 2 as well, isn't it? Your purpose of your part 2 is not necessarily to pass this extended driving test and to show that you can do some manoeuvres and you can answer some theory questions on the move, which is the other thing that they will ask you. All the details, as I said, are in the link. This is your ability to show what you are going to teach other people and how you're going to teach other people the processes that you're currently showing off to an examiner.
Yeah.
So.
If you can do them, there's a deeper understanding. The chances are you will then pass that on. Part 3, the easy one, is basically can you teach? Is your teaching ability test. Lasts approximately 1 hour, and you will take a learner up. If you're England, Scotland or Wales, you will take a learner up and you will be observed by the examiner sat in the back watching you conduct a 1 hour lesson with that learner. And obviously this is the one, joking aside, that is more problematic and has the lowest pass rates and all that type of stuff. But with the right guidance and right help, and particularly structuring your part 1 and 2 correctly, part 3 isn't impossible by any stretch of the imagination and can be quite good fun, can't it?
Yeah.
But it is the one that people struggle with the most.
So your part 2, unlike your theory, your part 1 can only be taken 3 times, and the same with your part 3 can only be taken 3 times. At the point where you failed your 3rd attempt at a part 2 or your 3rd attempt at your part 3, you would have to, if you wanted to, start the whole process off again, including your theory, including the DBS check, etc, etc. So have to start right from scratch again. So that is certainly something to be aware of when it comes to the timing of your training. And again, when it comes to looking at that overview of how you're planning to do that, be ultra aware of having to factor in, obviously, your own jobs, what you are doing in your life in terms of your commitments and your family support, etc, etc, and of course the test times. So it could well be that the theory test is fairly easy to get an appointment for in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Depending on your area, from a part 2 or a part 3 point of view, you could be looking at a number of weeks before having availability for those tests. So be aware of
yeah, and I can't remember if you mentioned it here or not, so I'll mention it again just in case I just missed it. There's 2 years from when you passed your part 1, you've got to pass those things. I already said that in a different video, but this video. So got 3 attempts. So if you were to fail your 3rd attempt and you've done, it's a year since your part 1, you've got to wait a year till you can start again. You can't just start again.
Anyway, is that it? Is that our overview?
I think so, because it is only an overview, and there's a lot more than that, but that's obviously stuff later on.
And
but
the
that's
details of all those tests can be found in the links that we send you.
Yeah, and that's basically how it works.
Okay, thank you.
Bye again. So you've got this far, so you're still thinking about it, so that's good. So now we're going to look at your options for training, aren't we? And there's a few of those. So I'd say the main one that most people go to, because you put into Google, train to be a driving instructor, up pops basically the big schools, because they have nice big budgets and all that type of stuff. So the big schools are the big schools, so the national schools, and they invariably, if not 100%, are tied into franchises and cars and all that type of stuff as well, aren't they? So
they tend to come with a complete package. I mean, you can dip in and out of various things that they're offering in terms of training. So some will offer you just training with no buy-in for cars or franchise. Some will offer you training with a franchise, but you can have your own car. Some will offer you the full lot, so training, franchise, pupils, cars, etc, etc. So there are various options, and I think that if you are doing your due diligence, you will have researched this and seen that the major kind of household names are going to come up. The familiar driving schools that you see out and about are going to come up.
what I would say on that is, as Lou said, do your research, but do your research also by looking at recommendation websites and places like that where people have gone to these businesses and found whether they're good, bad, indifferent, etc. And we know that some people will find everything bad and some people find everything good, so you've got to be an adult and use your common sense when you look. But have a look at those rating sites. I can't think of any names off the top of my head, but they are all out there, aren't they? They're even on things like TripAdvisor, even though it's not, the various ones, isn't there?
Absolutely. I think that seek out local instructors, seek out local trainee driving instructors, so people who are in the current process.
They've got a pink badge in the window when they're sat at McDonald's having a coffee, go and tap on the window.
Yeah, Yeah, absolutely. Seek out your social media sites as well. So, for example, our PDI group, which is full of just trainee driving instructors, you're more than welcome to be asking questions on there in terms of, is there anybody training with such and such?
that's all unbiased because there are no training organisations on there, so except us. But so as you'll find out as we go through, we're completely a bit different, aren't we, to everyone else? Things to be aware of is to look at what the contract is. Ties you in. A lot of them tie you in to a certain point. When you pass your part 2, you're tied in now to a franchise to do your part 3, to do a pink badge, which is your training license, and you sign a bit of paper saying you're going to do that. And then if you change your mind, you can't change your mind because you end up having to pay. Some are tighter than others. Some, as Lou said, won't tie you into that sort of stuff, but most of the bigger companies do have some sort of tying, because that's where their business is really. Their business is you taking out a pink badge and paying a franchise for the car and the work every week. That's why they're wanting you to come and train with them at the end
Some
of
of
the day.
them will tie you into a contract that doesn't actually kick in to the point you qualify. So you qualify and then your contract kicks in, and you then can't work independently. You are within that contract for 6 months or a year or possibly even more. So be aware of that. So certainly small print there.
Small print, take your citizen's advice if you're not sure about it when you look at a contract. My advice would be don't sign a contract, but I know that's not necessarily always possible. But really be careful about signing contracts. We deal with people on a daily basis. Some a lot worse than others. Some are quite good. So we're not gonna recommend people. That's not what we do, because things change and contracts change and that sort of stuff. But do your due diligence. I can't say that either. What I would say is it your only option? And I think a lot of people come to this and they see all these adverts, and you've gone through Google and Facebook, etc. And all you're seeing is the big boys, as we call them, and you think that's the only way of doing it, but it isn't, is it? And I wouldn't say it's necessarily the best or worst way, but it's not the only way.
No.
The other way is to do training with what we would call a local independent company, and local means, or small local means something under sort of 50 to 100. There's small nationals, isn't there? We deal with a couple around 100, 150 people that work within the franchise. And look to see where your training is, whether even it's a local company or a national company. Ask about your trainer, where they are based, where your training is going to be, because once you've signed, and you could end up travelling 50 to 100 miles for training. We know people that travel even more, don't we? How much of it is in classroom? How much of it is online? Are there tie-ins to online? There's certainly some companies that you have to have done your part 1 by this stage, your part 2 by this stage, otherwise you lose all your training you've signed up for. So it seems like a good price, but actually you may not end up with the in-car stuff because you haven't ticked the boxes in the other stuff. So look at timescales and all that sort of stuff. Local independents, I jumped around a bit there, but I suddenly thought about that. Local independents don't tend to tie you into all this stuff necessarily. Always check, of course. We do know 1 or 2 that are a bit naughty, but most of them have the right motives and are trying to build a business locally, and clearly then the training will probably be local and will be more hands-on and more tailored towards your needs. So look around for a local training company as well. So look at your big boys, do your research and all that sort of stuff, and then look at the local boys. And the easiest way to find trainers is good old Google, train to be a driving instructor. There's also something called the Audit Register, isn't there? ORDIT. We'll put a link as always. And that's got a list of, you put in your postcode and it gives you all the people near you, doesn't it?
Gives you the DVSA approved trainers.
Yeah. So, but we would also say there's a lot of good trainers out there that aren't audit registered, and there's a few audit registered trainers that may not suit you, let's put it that way. So again, just because they're on the list, it doesn't mean you definitely should go to them, and just because they're not on the list, it doesn't mean you should definitely not go to them. What we would say, and this is what we do when we do one-to-one training, is always have a meeting with whoever it is, but not the sales manager, the trainer. Make sure you meet the trainer. If they can't get you a meeting with the trainer, then I personally would walk away at that point, really would. And that meeting should be free, we feel, and should be just a chat, a coffee, and maybe a little drive, just so you can ask any questions you've got. More importantly, you can get a feeling with this person you can work with. Can I work with this person? Can I do 60, 80, 100 hours training with this person? Are they going to drive me mad? Because that's what's going to happen. Are they likely to take the whole summer off because they don't work the summers? Find out things like that. Just dig a bit deeper. When would the training be? Do they do weekends? Do they not do weekends? Do they do evenings? Do they do this? Do they do that? But again, you're an adult, but be aware they can tell you what they want you to hear rather than what is the reality. So the other thing we would always say on that is they should always be willing to give you details, with the permission of the other person of course, of people they're training, to be able to meet up with them. They may have a close Facebook group for the people they're training, phone numbers and stuff, because they're the people to talk through to the people that are actually customers of them at the moment. That's really important. And if again they won't supply you with that information, then the alarm bells would be ringing for me. Anything? Yeah, okay. The other thing we would say is about paying money up front, isn't it? That's one of the big things. I think we call it pay as you go, and basically what it means is pay as you go. So there are certain things you could pay money up front for, so that might be on some online training packages, and also see if they do an online training package, because we feel that's quite important. You're obviously online because you're watching this, so you can do training away from your trainer, watching videos and doing real workbooks and that type of stuff, which is a very useful tool, isn't it? Would say that because that's basically what our business is. But it doesn't matter if they're using ours or not. It's just that it's something you can supplement when you're doing your in-car stuff. So ask them if they have any sort of online resources and pay as you train. If they're making you pay all the money up front, again, we have some people that like to do that because they just like to get rid of it. They got it in the bank accounts, they've been made redundant or whatever. They just want to get rid of it. Find out what the rules are about getting your money back and stuff like that, because certainly there are a few that you pay the money, you're not going to get your money back because you've signed a bit of paper that's really small print that says basically our refund policy is we don't have a policy, and that's a refund policy. You don't get your money back, so be very aware of that. Try to find someone that will do pay as you train. The good thing with that is you don't have to fight to get your money back, and you can walk away at any point. So if your trainer isn't suitable for you, the timings aren't suitable, anything like that, you can just say thank you very much, but no thank you very much, and you can walk away.
I think the other thing to be aware of is that regardless of who you have stepped into a deal with, be a signed contract or not, it doesn't mean that that's exclusive. So it doesn't stop you seeking training from other places. So it is possible to mix and match your trainer, or to have one trainer backing up another trainer. So
or buy into your own online resources. If they don't have an online resource backup, you can just pay for that yourself. That type of stuff. And so there shouldn't be anything in the contract to stop you training elsewhere. I've come across it once, but the person ignored it and nothing ever happened, so that was fine.
From a training option point of view, you can self-source your information and knowledge and resources for your part one. So for example, you could be using a theory app or the DVSA's information to be training to do that. So you could also sign into contracts and with companies who will give you a very in-depth, specific online training package for your part one. It could be that you've got a friend or family who are driving instructors who are also going to help you with that. There are numerous ways of doing your part one. So I think that you can...
But you can do the whole thing, I'm going to say independently, but what we mean by that is self-sourcing. So you can, for the part two, so instead of signing up for anyone, whether it be local, independent or national, whatever, it's just go through the process. So certainly, as we said in other videos, sending off a DBS, etc. Start your part one, and then when you feel you need some support or guidance or help, that's when to buy into those services. And we're not here to, well, I suppose we are here to recommend really. My recommendation would be that's definitely the way to start, because you're not going to lose anything. If you sign into a £2,000 contract or a £1,000 contract or whatever, you're going to lose that money. And something I say to people again on a daily basis, only ever spend as much as you're willing to lose or can afford to lose, because you may not qualify, you may not like the trainers, the establishment, etc. So take it in bite-sized chunks, and you can self-source, right? You can't self-train because you have to get the information from somewhere. So you're going to have to buy books, you're going to have to go online, you're going to have someone's guidance, you just will need it. Some people will more than others. So self-sourcing is definitely the way to start, I feel, because you can get your part one started, and we'll put a link under this for our part one section, which is free, etc. And you can go buy some videos or YouTube or whatever to learn what the part two does and how that works and how to practice and the understanding and all that sort of stuff. And then once you've done a bit of that, then that's probably the time to find someone who will take you out for at least a mock test on the part two, a little bit of training, probably a mock test followed up by an hour's training maybe. And if that's good, go for the test. If not, do another one of those, for example. And the same with the part three. Part three is a little bit more complicated than that, but we won't go into that too much at this stage because these guys are obviously very early stages. But yeah, just be aware of what you're looking at, what you're signing, and be aware of all the fantastic stories you'll be told. Really,
you will be talked to and probably read information about earning before you qualify as well. So at the point where you've passed your part 2, the ability to be able to show an examiner that you know how to drive, it's quite possible at that point to be able to get dual controls put into even your family car potentially, to get instructor insurance and to be out there teaching for free. So that's certainly how you can get your experience up. In terms of going onto a trainee license, or a pink badge, you'll hear people call that, is the point where you get licensed from the DVSA to be able to charge for lessons that you give. And you can do that before you qualify. Now, to do that, you need to have done 40 hours of Part 3 training to then be signed off by another driving instructor or a trainer. You need to be sponsored by another driving instructor or a trainer, and you send that form off and the DVSA will give you your pink license. At the point where you have your pink license, you then need a further 20 hours of Part 3 training within the first 3 months of getting that license and before you book your Part 3 test. So by going for a trainee license, you are committing yourself to 60 hours worth of training in one way, shape or another. So be aware of that. You can't teach for reward if you do not have a trainee license, but you can certainly get experience, like I said, about putting dual controls in cars and getting instructor insurance and teaching friends and family for free. That is also the option. You do not have to go on a trainee license. You do have to get experience. So that is the two different things. You'll hear people talking about the benefits of a trainee license. I need you to know that there are some massive disadvantage to a trainee license if that means that you're going to get signed into contracts that a contract that lasts a year, but a trainee license that only lasts for 6 months, things like that.
It's an interesting one. It's most of the case actually.
Yeah, needing to be aware of things like the fact that as soon as you have a trainee license, it's not particularly unusual to be given pupils by the company that you're training that may well not be necessarily appropriate for somebody who's in the very early stages. It might be in areas that you didn't necessarily think that you wanted to travel to pick up pupils, so out of the zone that you are familiar with. And I guess more importantly, certainly from our point of view, and quite a lot of our training is related to rescue training, so people who have got quite a long way down the line of their training and are then not being successful with their own qualifying process, that what's happened is that you're out there on a trainee license working pretty damn hard because you've got quite a lot of hours and you're needing to do quite a lot of hours, particularly if you're signed into a contract that is charging you for a franchise.
Only 15 to 20 just to break even, isn't it? Depends on the contract.
And that you're out there not necessarily being supervised and not necessarily having people watch your lessons. And what happens is you get 3, 4, 5 months down the line where you've had lots and lots of practice, but not necessarily doing it right.
So you've practiced potentially bad things, wrong things, which clearly is more difficult to deal with than not practicing it like that in the first place. So you've got to make sure the support is there. You've got to make sure that, again, to do with contracts and so on, that they are going to sit in the back and watch your lessons, majority of them, or not majority of them, but a percentage of them. There's 2 different rules which we won't worry about here, but being observed is a very important tool, so make sure your training company is willing to do that and is going to do that. Your franchise company is part of their franchise, that they make sure you're on the right track and all that sort of stuff. Otherwise, you'll be better off not doing the practice, really.
And how they do that training, so how much of the training that you need is going to be classroom based, how much of it is going to be online, how much of it is going to be in car, perhaps with role play. So for example, a trainer role playing a pupil and you doing role play, which is a skill in itself, both as a trainer and as a potential driving instructor, and how much of it is actually with real pupils watching real lessons, or you watching real lessons, somebody watching your real lessons, because that's the reality of it. That's what you're going to be doing as a job, but that's also what you're going to be tested on, your ability to be able to teach. So if the majority of your training has been role play, it could be the massive piece of the jigsaw that is missing at the point where you're needing it.
And it really isn't, the trainee license really isn't the only way of getting that practice, and that's really worth being aware of. Be aware of the motive of the company, that that's where their income is going to come from. The income doesn't tend to come from the training. There isn't a lot of profit in that for training companies. It is getting you paying whatever a week for the car and the thing and all that sort of stuff, and that's where the profit is. So nothing wrong with that. We're all running businesses. That's how the world works. But is that good? Is that right for you? Is that the right thing for you? Would it be worth, when you're doing your part 2 and stuff, of just getting some bolt-on insurance on a family member's car and going out and teaching niece, nephew, son, daughter, and just seeing if you're actually going to enjoy it? Because you don't want to sign up to a contract, get your bum in the seat on the first day, hate it, because that happens quite a lot. So there are other ways of doing it. You can control your own car. I think you did it with people's own cars, didn't you? 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds that were driving their own cars. You just jumped in and taught them when you were training. I got my car dual controlled and insured for the purpose, and I did it without charging. So we've both done both sides of that, haven't we?
I think that I'm really aware that this video is now running over quite a lot. It's quite a long video, but it's a really important thing that you do before you go signing anything or getting yourself into some kind of training contracts and making any decisions. What I suggest that you do is read the blurb that we've got associated with this training options, because it will be a little bit more succinct than perhaps we've jumped around a little bit. And also what we are going to give you is some questions for you to ask the companies or the trainers or the driving instructors who are offering to help you, that just is a little bit of a checklist of things that we really strongly recommend that you're asking the individual training organisation that you're approaching. So it gives you some kind of structure when it comes to you interviewing them. Yeah,
absolutely. Remember, you're the customer. Don't fall for the classic, we're going to test to see if you'll make a good instructor stuff, because we don't know anyone that hasn't got through that process with the big boys. Local companies like ourselves, we do exactly that, but we do turn away about half number of people, don't we? National companies don't tend to. I'm not going to say definitely don't, because they might sue me, but I've never come across it, let's put it that way. But local companies may do that process, but it's more of a real process than a false process. So be aware of that. Remember, you are the customer, you are paying your good money over. And as important as the money, it's also just enjoying it and getting what you need. Otherwise, there's a good chance that you're going to end up having to look at retraining, paying more, and that's where we tend to come in 90% of the time. That's how that's our living, is retraining people, and that's why we're making this section. Because not that we don't want to pay the mortgage, but we'd like to pay in a different way, rather than on people's woes and sorrows when they're running out of money and they've gone so far they've got to carry on.
I think the one thing that we haven't talked about is the amount of time and effort and sheer blood, sweat and tears that it does take.
Oh, it's a piece of cake, isn't it? 2 weeks qualifying, no sweat. Do it in 6 weeks. We saw one the other day.
It's going to take longer than you think.
When I was doing some research just now, didn't we see some? 6 days.
Qualifying 6 days or train, yeah.
I think I'll go there then.
You're given 2 years for a reason. It is jolly hard work. It is possibly one of the hardest things that I have ever done in terms of training process.
And you've been through quite a lot of training in your life.
I have been through quite a lot of training in my life. So be as prepared as you can for that. Have your family or support mechanism and network around you. Be ultra aware that they are going to lose you to the qualifying process for some time.
You're going to potentially watch a video 10 o'clock at night. I've got to go out and do a manoeuvre now.
I think you also need to be aware that although it's not academic from the point of view that nobody's asking you to have A-levels and all the rest of it, from a time point of view, we would suggest it's about equivalent to doing 2 A-levels in a night class, you know, that kind of thing. So if you do not have the ability to put in that effort, both within your own research, within your own homework, with your own private practice that you're doing, it is going to show within your training if you are not doing that kind of stuff. So
if you do a pink, you've got to do a minimum of 60 hours in car, plus your part 2, plus your part 1. I wouldn't like to put a number of hours on it, but it runs into the hundreds, doesn't it? It runs into the hundreds of hours. Not all in car, but homework, watching videos, however you're going to do it, doing your theory. The theory itself can take, 50 to 100 hours, I think, to do it properly and to make it work properly. So yes, you've got to have that time, or you've got to have the ability to make that time. So we have kids, so if we're doing stuff like this, we'll get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and do our planning then, and then put the kids into something and come and do some videos. So as long as you can have a plan, you may have a busy life, but if there's a way of you being able to adapt that, and you trained as a single mum of 3 kids and you've managed it, but you had to have that support network, sisters and all that sort of stuff. So we're not, well, we are trying to put you off to a certain degree. We're trying to give you the reality that it is, you know, you've got to have that time and inclination and be able to put in that effort, really.
Anyway, read the blurb and watch this video again if you're needing to.
Yeah.
Look at the questions and do your research.
Yeah. Don't sign anything. Did I say that out loud? Really try and avoid signing something. If you have to, you have to. But
Certainly
really
on
know
day
what
one.
you're
Don't
signing.
sign anything on day one.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no reason why you can't get to the part 2 without having to worry about that too much. Really. Okay.
Okay.
Good luck with it. Put you off now. Bye.